Children, here is the appreciation of the poem. The poem Height of Ridiculous is written by James Wendell Holmes. The poem has 8 stanzas and rhyme scheme of the poem is ABCB. The poet used many figure of speech such as alliteration, repetition, inversion, antithesis, tautology and onomatopoeia. But he has used transferred epithet in this following line. 10 days and nights with sleepless eye. In this line, the word sleepless has been used for the poet, not for the eye. The theme of the poem is a humorous one written for enjoyment with plenty of funny expression. The main purpose of the poet is to entertain the readers. Here, poet talks about how too much of anything can have inverse effect. On reading the poem, both its creator and its reader suffered in different ways due to the ridiculous nature of the poem. Children will see the figure of speech of the poem here. First one, I wrote some lines once on a time. Figure of speech used in this line is inversion. The order of the words in the lines has been rearranged for poetic effect. The correct order should be once on a time I wrote some lines. Second one, in a wondrous merry mood. There are two figure of speech for this particular line. First one is alliteration. The sound of letter M is repeated for poetic effect. And second one is tautology. The word wondrous and merry means the same thing. Third one is, and thought as usual men would say. Figure of speech for this particular line used is alliteration. The sound of letter A has been repeated to maintain the musical tone of the poem. The figure of speech for fourth line, they were exceeding good, is hyperbole. Kindly elaborate. The goodness is exaggerated to denote good lines of the poem. Fifth one, they were so queer, so queer. The figure of speech used for this particular line is repetition. The words so and queer have been repeated twice to indicate how funny the poem was. Sixth one, I laughed as I would die. The figure of speech used for this particular line is hyperbole. The laughter of the poet on reading the poem he had composed is exaggerated to denote how funny the poem was. Seventh one, a sober man am I. Figure of speech used in this line is inversion. The order of the word in the line has been rearranged for poetic effect. The correct order should be I am a sober man. Next one, I called my servant and he came. The figure of speech used here is alliteration. The sound of letter C has been repeated for poetic effect. Next one is ninth, to mind a slender man like me, he of the mighty limb. The figure of speech used in this line is antithesis. Contrasting ideas of being slender and mighty are placed beside each other in a single line to indicate the humorous nature of the situation. 10th one, I added as a trifling jest. Figure of speech used in this line is alliteration. The sound of letter A has been repeated for poetic effect. 11th one, there will be the devil to pay. Figure of speech used in this line is metaphor. The poet uses this line to humorously indicate that the servant better follow his master's order or else he will get himself in a big trouble. 12th one, and saw him peep within. The figure of speech used in this line is tautology. The word saw and peep means the same thing which has come in the same line. 13th one, at the first line he read his face. The figure of speech used in this line is alliteration. The sound of letter H has been repeated for poetic effect. Next one, 14th one, the grin grew broad. The figure of speech used in this line is alliteration. The sound of letter GR has been repeated for poetic effect. 15th one, and shot from year to year. There are two figure of speech in this particular line. First one is repetition. The word year has been used twice to indicate the funny grin of the servant from one end of his face to other. And second one is hyperbole. The wideness of the grin of the servant is exaggerated to show that he found the poem composed by the poet to be funny. Continuing with figure of speech 16th one, he read the third a chuckling sound. Figure of speech used in this line is onomatopoeia. The sound of the laughter, that is chuckling, made by the servant on reading the poem is depicted in this line. 17th one, I now began to hear. The figure of speech used in this line is inversion. The order of the word in this line has been rearranged for poetic effect. The correct order should be I began to hear now. 18th one, the fourth he broke into a roar. The figure of speech used in this line is onomatopoeia. The sound of loud laugh, that is roar, made by the servant on reading the poem is depicted in this line. 19th one, the fifth his waistband split. The figure of speech used in this line is hyperbole. The laughter of the servant upon reading the poem is exaggerated for poetic effect by stating that his waistband has split due to the laughter. Next one, 20th. The sixth he burst 5 button and tumbled in a fit. In this line, the figure of speech used here is hyperbole. The laughter of the servant upon reading the poem is exaggerated for poetic effect by stating that the servant tumbled in a fit of laughter. Next one, 21. 10 days and nights with sleepless eye. The figure of speech used in this line is hyperbole. The laughter of the servant on reading the poem the poet has composed is exaggerated for poetic effect by stating that the servant tumbled in a fit of laughter. Continuing with the figure of speech, children, 22. 10 days and night with sleepless eye. There are 4 figure of speech for this particular line. First one is hyperbole. The laughter of the servant on reading the poem the poet has composed is exaggerated for poetic effect. Second one is transferred epithet. The adjective sleepless has been transferred from the poet to his eyes. Next one is antithesis. 2 opposite words, day and night, are mentioned in the same line for poetic effect. And the last one is synecdoche, part of the whole. The I stands for the entire poet who was sleepless and not just a part of his body. Next one is 23. I watched that wretched man. The figure of speech used in this line is alliteration. The sound of letter W has been repeated for poetic effect. Continuing with figure of speech 24. As funny as I can. There are 2 figure of speech for this particular line. First one is simile. There is a direct comparison between the poem already composed by the poet to the extent of funny poem the poet can compose in the future. And second one is repetition. The word as is used to indicate that henceforth the poet would never again compose as funny as the one he had composed before.
Thank you.